Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This week, we're diving into a really fascinating period, one filled with drama and grandeur. It's time to explore the world of Baroque art and architecture.
And when we say Baroque, people might just think of those really ornate designs, all the gold leaf and embellishment.
Yeah, that tracks.
But it's so much deeper than that. What makes the Baroque period really fascinating, at least to me, is how it used art and architecture as this kind of strategic response, like during the Protestant Reformation.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like the Catholic Church saw this new wave of religious thought challenging them, challenging their authority. It said, oh, okay, game on. Let's use art to remind everyone who's really in charge here.
Exactly. It's a power move, but like etched in stone and marble.
I like that.
Yeah.
A power move in stone and marble. And it worked, didn't it? Like imagine walking into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome.
Oh, I know, right?
That massive dome. It's not just there to look pretty, is it? It's meant to evoke a sense of awe. You feel small. Like it's reinforcing the church's authority just by its sheer scale.
It's true. I mean, how can you walk in there and not feel completely overwhelmed?
Exactly. And you know what's interesting to me? The term Baroque itself, doesn't it come from the word for like an imperfect pearl? I think it's Barocco.
Yeah, it does. It's like the art historians were saying, we know it's extra, it's a bit much even, a little irregular, but that's what makes it so captivating.
I love that. A beautifully flawed pearl. That's a great way to put it. It's like they were breaking the rules of classical art, all that symmetry and balance to create something new.
Exactly. And to really understand how this played out, across different parts of Europe, we need to go to where it all started, Italy.
Okay, so we're going to Rome, the heart of the Catholic Church.
Exactly. Where Baroque architecture really went all out.
Yeah.
You've already got St. Peter's, but then there's the Church of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane.
Oh, that's Borromini, right.
It is.
That's a name that makes architecture students sweat. His buildings weren't just buildings, they were like sculptures almost,
Right.
with all those undulating walls and dramatic curves. He really did invent a whole new way of thinking about space and architecture.
Totally. Like, he thought of buildings like they were theatrical sets. He'd use light and shadow to make you feel like there was drama and movement happening all around you.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And it wasn't just churches either. The Baroque style, it was everywhere. Palaces, public buildings. It became a status symbol, like a way to show off your wealth and power.
So from the churches to the palaces, Baroque architecture was taking over Italy.
Yeah.
It's like they were saying, look, we're back, and we're more extra than ever.
And then we hop over to France. Same era, but,
Yeah.
a little different vibe.
Okay, so what was France doing?
Still all about that grandeur, for sure, but with a more classical, refined touch. Think Louis XIV, the Sun King. He basically wrote the rule book on French Baroque.
Ah, the Sun King, of course. A man who definitely knew a thing or two about being extra himself.
Right. And that's how we get Versailles.
Versailles, the ultimate expression of French Baroque architecture.
Exactly. It's grand, symmetrical. It's designed to showcase Louis XIV's power, no subtlety there. And then there are those gardens.
Don't even get me started on the gardens. They're legendary.
Like a masterpiece of landscaping.
Yeah.
Completely designed to show that humans could control nature. You've got perfectly manicured hedges, geometric layouts, those elaborate fountains.
See, this is so interesting to me. When I think Baroque, the first thing that pops in my head is the ornamentation, right? It's over the top, for sure. But the gardens at Versailles are just as extra. They're just a different kind of extra.
That's a really good way to put it. And this is where things get even more interesting, because Baroque, even though it had that very distinct look, wasn't just a one-size-fits-all movement. It kind of took on different flavors as it spread.
Oh, like how in Poland they blended the Italian Baroque with their own local traditions. They used more vibrant colors and these super intricate details. Didn't they even use unusual building materials sometimes? I feel like I read about a Baroque church made out of wattle and daub.
You're thinking of the Church of Peace in Geur. It's amazing. And it proves that even though Baroque started in Italy, it could adapt and change as it traveled throughout Europe.
It's like art is having this conversation with the world around it. It's constantly changing and evolving. Yeah. But speaking of conversations and the spread of ideas, I'm dying to know how this style made its way across the Atlantic. Did they just, like, ship boatloads of marble and gold leaf to the Americas?
Well, they kind of did. Not literally boatloads, maybe. But, metaphorically speaking.
I knew it. It couldn't have been cheap to build all those grand churches.
Oh, for sure. And remember how we were talking about the Baroque being tied to the Catholic Church?
Right.
So when those Spanish and Portuguese colonizers, came to the Americas, they brought their religion and their architectural style.
Ah, so it was about more than just converting souls. They wanted to transform the landscape too, those grand, imposing structures.
Exactly. Visual statement of power. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Instead of just copying European Baroque, the Americas, they developed their own unique styles.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like, okay, so you've got your basic Baroque,
Sure.
right, the drama, all the ornamentation, that sense of movement.
Right, those are the base ingredients.
Exactly. But then what? You add local spices and flavors.
I like that. Perfect way to put it. So in Mexico, for instance, they incorporated all this amazing indigenous artistry into those Baroque churches. Think intricate carvings, but then they blend in native plants, animals, alongside the traditional European motifs.
And we can't forget about that color. Mexican Baroque is like a fiesta for your eyes.
Totally.
I remember seeing pictures of the sanctuary of Ocatlan, and it just blew my mind. Every single inch of that facade, it's covered in carvings and sculptures, like a tapestry but in stone.
And that fusion of styles. It wasn't just happening in Mexico either. Over in Peru, you see a lot of Incan art in the churches in Cusco. So you end up with this really cool blend of European grandeur, but then also these indigenous traditions.
It shows that Baroque wasn't a rigid thing. It was more of a starting point that different cultures could use to tell their own stories.
Right.
So, okay, we've got Italy, France, Poland, the Americas. Did this Baroque wave reach anywhere else?
You might be surprised to hear this, but even tucked away in Eastern Europe, you had these regions like Wallachia and Moldavia, which is Romania today.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They developed their own unique Baroque style. They called it the Brancovanesque style. Imagine this. Italian Baroque, right? But you mix in Byzantine and Islamic influences, too.
Whoa. That's a mouthful. That's a lot of influences all in one place. What does that even look like? Paint us a picture.
It's beautiful. Think delicate floral motifs, those really intricate carvings, and these really unique twisted columns. They almost look like they're dancing up the facade. It's definitely still ornate, but it's also got this playful, light, elegant feeling. Different from the heavier Baroque you see in Western Europe.
I'm seeing a theme here. It's amazing how just one style could lead to so much creativity across different cultures. But architecture is great. It's a good place to start when we're talking about Baroque.
Yeah.
But we can't forget all the other arts that were happening during this time.
Oh, you're totally right.
It was a time when art was exploding, right?
It was.
And that energy kind of poured into everything.
Yeah.
Painting, sculpture, furniture, even music. Speaking of painting, there's one name we can't ignore from the Baroque period, Caravaggio.
He's unforgettable.
Right. He was such a rebel. Didn't he basically throw out the rule book?
Yeah.
He was painting directly from life. And he wasn't afraid to use everyday people as models for those really important religious figures.
Exactly. Caravaggio was all about the drama and the realism, capturing those raw emotions in a scene, like in The Calling of St. Matthew.
Oh, I love that one.
It's amazing.
What's so great about it?
You've got these ordinary men just hanging out in a tavern, right? It's dark. And then suddenly this beam of light comes in and illuminates Matthew. He's just been called upon by Jesus.
When I saw that painting, I remember being struck by how much I felt like I was right there. Like I was part of that moment. It's the lighting, right?
It is. He was a master of chiaroscuro, that really dramatic contrast of light and shadow. It creates so much depth and a feeling of theatricality. He wasn't afraid to break the rules and just paint what he saw, even if it shook things up in the art world. And his influence on other Baroque painting, huge, really, really big.
Caravaggio's story got me thinking, though. Were there any women artists who made a name for themselves back then? It feels like it was a bit of a boys' club.
Yeah. It was a different time, for sure. Women, they faced a lot of barriers if they wanted to be artists. But that didn't stop everyone. Artemisia Gentileschi is a great example.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of her. She was known for painting some pretty intense stuff, right? Kind of gruesome, even.
You're thinking of Judith beheading Holofernes. It's a powerful painting, for sure. Really visceral. It shows that story from the Bible and the look on Judith's face. It's chilling. Pure determination as she does what needs to be done.
It really makes you think.
Yeah.
She was painting these really intense, even shocking scenes during a time when women were, well, expected to be a lot more passive. It's kind of amazing.
Right. She was not afraid to tackle those tough subjects at all and show women as strong, complicated people. And speaking of women who were making waves back then, let's not forget the ones who used their power as patrons, like Queen Christina of Sweden. She was a huge collector of Baroque art.
Oh, right. Wasn't she the one who actually commissioned Bernini to design her tune?
The one and only.
It's like they say,
Yeah.
behind every great artist, you'll probably find a really great patron.
Yeah.
But back to Bernini for a second. He was more than just a sculptor, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He was like, I don't know, the Michelangelo of the Baroque era.
Oh, golly.
Designing everything from like fountains to those massive facades on buildings.
Like the Trevi Fountain.
Exactly.
That's all him. Those amazing poses, all that water cascading everywhere. It just feels so alive and dramatic.
Like you're watching a scene from a play.
Totally. And you know what else I love about the Baroque? The interiors. Those rooms. It's all velvet and gilded mirrors and furniture that's so ornate, it's almost like you could eat it.
I know, right? Furniture was like another art form back then, and during the Baroque, it really exploded. They were using these really rich materials like ebony and tortoiseshell, and then inlaying them with brass and ivory, and all of it polished until it gleamed. Oh, and those curvy legs. Like, what even are those?
Yeah.
So extra. So extra. I love it. It's like they took more is more as a challenge and just ran with it. But I have to be honest, sometimes when I see some of those super opulent Baroque interiors, I'm like, where would I even begin? Like, how do you decorate your home when you're surrounded by all that?
Right. It can be a bit much, but it's all about finding that balance. The Baroque might feel really overwhelming if you're not used to it, but when you break it down, it's about creating those feelings of drama and movement and a kind of sensory richness. You can definitely do that in your own house without covering everything in gold leaf.
That's good to know. Okay, so we've talked about painting, sculpture, architecture. What about music? And dance. Weren't those art forms having their own Baroque moments?
Oh, for sure. For sure. This was the time of Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, composers who knew how to make music soar, full of emotion and really dramatic stuff. And then for dance, we see ballet being born, like the ballet we all know today. And fun fact, Louis XIV.
Mr. Extra himself. He wasn't just a big patron of the arts, he actually loved to dance. He even went so far as to establish that very first Royal Dance Academy.
Of course he did. Leave it to the Sun King to found ballet as we know it. But it's amazing when you think about how interconnected all those different art forms were. They were all feeding off of each other. Like when I see a Baroque painting, sometimes I feel like I can hear the music that would be playing if it came to life. And it probably sounds a lot like Bach.
Totally. Baroque was about more than just creating a painting or a building or a piece of music. It was about creating this whole experience, something that felt immersive and really spoke to all of your senses. And speaking of immersive, you know what we haven't talked about yet? Gardens. Those incredible Baroque gardens.
Oh, yeah. We touched on Versailles earlier, but they were basically outdoor cathedrals.
Yeah.
You got those crazy hedges and all the fountains and even hidden little grottos.
Right. And in a lot of ways, garden designers back then, they used a lot of the same techniques as the painters and the architects, all about light and shadow, color, texture, creating drama and intrigue.
I love that. It's like they took a garden, something that should be peaceful and serene, and then they said, how can we make this over the top?
Exactly. It's not just a place to take a walk, right? It's a place to think, to get lost, to be surprised by what you find around each corner, and also just a chance to be like, wow, look what we can do.
Right. I mean, when you think about it, the Baroque period, it was about taking something, anything, a building, a painting, a garden, and then pushing it until it became extraordinary. Something that made you feel something, anything. It's kind of inspiring in a way, don't you think?
It is. It's really inspiring. And yeah, the Baroque period, it eventually gave way to other styles and new ideas. But it's still with us, I mean, just think about how important Caravaggio and Bernini still are, or how people still go to Versailles and just freak out when they see it.
It goes to show that even though art movements come and go, when they're good, they really stick with you, right?
They do. The best ones stick around and they keep giving us new ideas and inspiring us.
It's like this echo through time.
I like that. So yeah, next time you see a Baroque building, maybe you're lucky enough to travel to Rome or something, Or even if you're just listening to a really amazing Bach fugue.
Or even just hanging some velvet curtains in your living room.
Exactly. Just remember this period, this time when art was all about embracing those big emotions,
Yeah.
the drama, and never being afraid to go big.
And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to add a little bit of that Baroque drama to your own life. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to come back next week when we'll be exploring. Well, you'll have to tune in to find out.